Welcome to this week's End of Days Update, coming to you from Terre Haute, Indiana. We had such a great time. It's a church we've been coming to for years. And if you're anywhere near here, we're going to be in Effingham at the Effingham Camp Meeting. That'll be so fun. Starting up tonight, tomorrow night, and the next night, we'll have a blast there in Effingham. Then we're going to be in Mount Pleasant, Iowa. If you're anywhere near Cedar Rapids, Iowa, we're not far from there. We'll be at Faith Christian Outreach Church. We'll be there Sunday morning, Sunday night, and Monday night. So come be with us. We'll have a great time. We're coming to you every week to look at the different things that point to the coming of the Lord, and specifically the gathering of nations and the activity that happens right after the rapture. Because you can see the setup for that. We can see how close we are to the rapture, or semi-close, because the second coming has tons of signs. The rapture has no signs at all. So when we see the nations get into position for what happens after we leave, it makes it blatant for us. And it's wild. The Lord wants us to know these things. Remember, Paul talked about the baptism 12 times, coming of the Lord 52 times. For every one verse there is about the first coming of the Lord, there's 8 times more about the second coming. So it's blatant that we should be aware of the second coming. Because remember, the Lord rebuked the crowd. He always rebuked the Pharisees. The time he rebuked the crowd was he said, hey, you can tell what the weather's going to be, but you don't know your hour of visitation. So we look at the things that are happening around Israel that are blatant, and boy, probably in the last 6 months, the most blatant stuff has been the October attack with Hamas. I mean, that continues, which is kind of amazing. Each week, Israel comes up with a ceasefire option to get some of the hostages exchanged, and Hamas has turned it down every time. I can't believe the world doesn't just hammer Hamas and go, you're turning down a ceasefire proposal every single week, and no one says a word. I like what one of the rabbis said this last week. He said, in Europe, we're going to have to do something because of the anti-Semitism getting so great. There has to be almost a withdrawal mentality to bring people from Europe to Israel to get them safety. Because he said it's mirroring the 1930s. There's so much anti-Semitism. I mean, even the colleges in America not able to have graduations because people picketing and boycotting and stuff. And they don't even know what they're picketing and boycotting for. The UN this week called for basically every single nation to acknowledge a Palestinian state. It's interesting that the Palestinians, Hamas, Hezbollah, they won't recognize Israel as a state. Israel right now, at this taping this morning, Israel had rockets. So many missiles and rockets were fired from Hezbollah in Lebanon. You had 10 Israelis wounded in the Upper Galilee. I mean, 1,000 people have been having to go to shelters this last week again. So this is continuing, not just from Hamas in Gaza, in which Israel found a mile-long tunnel. So it looks like they're pushing hostages through those tunnels into Egypt right now. Israel's basically surrounded on 7 different fronts they're being fired at. You had the Houthi shell drones came over again right by the Red Sea. One hit right by Eilat. And you've got that happening. But really what's ratcheting up is they had a surprise or a secret meeting yesterday morning. The war cabinet came together for Israel, deciding what to do about Hezbollah on the north. I mean, there's massive fires raging from all the missiles that hit even there. And then you got missiles being fired from Iraq, Iranian missiles being fired from Iraq, things coming from the Houthis, things coming from Gaza. So it's completely all around Israel. So what's that all about? They want to destroy Israel because this is the moment and the time just before the coming of the Lord. You got nature freaking out, man. You got storms, you got tornadoes, you got volcanoes. I don't even get into all the stuff about the asteroids, but one thing after another. And this is a couple of things that are just really, really, really pointing toward World War III. You don't want to just talk about it to freak people out, but when you see these things set up for that, it lets you aware of how close we are. Because right after the rapture of the church, you have some of the seals in Revelation open. The first one's the Antichrist. Second one is World War III. You had this week an announcement that Emmanuel Macron, France's president, on Friday will announce that Europe is going to war with Russia. And you had Russia threaten America this morning because we green-lighted some missiles coming from Ukraine into some places in Russia. And Russia basically said it's going to be a fatal day for the United States. Along with, you have Emmanuel Macron saying we're going to war with Russia right now. So, boy, you've got some verbiage that's even weirder than China was doing. And then you have China's president coming into the Middle East, going into kind of court favor with Turkey and with Iran and with Syria. So you got all of it coming together. It's so in your face, it's blatant to go like, okay, what's getting ready to happen next? I'm so intrigued that we don't hear enough from any other people in the world. And I was a little bit freaked out about Biden's cabinet. President Biden basically wouldn't come out and say that Israel had not been doing war crimes. He refused to acknowledge that Israel had that much of a right to defend itself. So it is so weird to watch all these different prime ministers and presidents basically say, I'm not going to support you, Israel. But this is what the Bible said it would look like. So what will happen is the Antichrist will come on the scene, and he'll be like a rescuer for this whole setup. But man, it's playing out right in front of our eyes that we're about to see Jesus. Isn't that wild? We're going to get to see the King. We're about to be raptured. We're about to be caught up. I think we have a little bit of time left, but not very much. So what do? We look at all this stuff, and it doesn't freak us out. It tells us that something's coming. What's coming? Jesus. He's about to come. So we always go back to the Word and look at all the signs, because they're blatant, they're concise, they're flawless, they're easy to understand. You got Israel regathered in our lifetime, Jerusalem won back. Jesus said the generation that sees those will not pass away till all is fulfilled. And then you got the Hebrew language restored, Ethiopian Jews brought back. You got the fertility of the land of Israel. You got the revival of the Roman Empire. You got the Capitol building in the Roman Empire right there, looking just like the Tower of Babel. I mean, it's crazy. You had the archway for Baal worship, Russia rebuilt right there in Palmyra, Syria. And where's that? That's where the Tower of Babel was. I mean, the Talmud says that's the last sign you'll see before the Messiah comes. You have foxes showing up on the Temple Mount. You got fish showing up in the Dead Sea. You had the Dead Sea turned blood red where Sodom and Gomorrah was last fall, on the Day of Atonement. I mean, that's crazy. So you have all this. You have predatory birds, 170 different species of predatory birds start showing up in the land. You've got the cleanup crew in Israel right now for the Ezekiel 38 war and then for the Battle of Armageddon. So God's got all these different groups in place. The main group that I think freaks me out is you got the Temple Mount Institute ready to start having sacrifices. And then you had the 5 red heifers that got flown over from Texas. The only way they could fly them over was they were going to be service animals for people. I think that's just crazy. That's the only way they could get those cows into the country. But the amazing thing is they didn't have their ears clipped. The ears weren't clipped because of COVID. All the ones just recently have all gotten clipped and they can't use them. But these are a group of red heifers that have to be used between the year 2 and 3, and they're right there between the year 2 and 3. So one of the main things for sacrifice is set up right now for Israel. So that's absolutely amazing. Then you got men will be lovers themselves. You have selfie sticks. You got all these different signs, one after another. There's many more that I don't have time to get into. But then after that, you've got signals. You had blood red moons on Passover and Tabernacles, 4 in a row. I mean, think about it. NASA calls that a tetrad, 4 blood red moons. And amazingly, it happened these times. And guess what the dates were in Israel? 1967 is when it happened, when Jerusalem was won back. 1948, when Israel was made a nation. And 1492 at the Edict of Expulsion, when the Jews were kicked out of Spain. God raised up Columbus to sail the ocean blue in 1492. And what did Columbus find? America, a safe harbor for the Jews. Well, then after that, you have the Bethlehem star. You got Jupiter, Regulus, and Venus. All these 3 planets came together at the birth of Jesus. Jupiter's a king planet. Regulus, regal, king planet. Regulus did retrograde motion and crowned Jupiter. So you have just an amazing event at the birth of Jesus. Then you had Venus there too as well. What was the constellation? Virgo. This last year when it happened again, we have a celestial event, Jupiter, Regulus, Venus. The constellation was Leo because he's the lion of the tribe of Judah. My friend, this is it. I mean, I hear people say, well, all these signs have happened before. These signs have never happened before. This is a generation that Jesus said he would come back, and he made it very clear. So what do? Help our local church, help our local pastor, hustle, be engaged. Don't fit church into your life. It is your life. Why? You're about to see the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. Think about it. The one who was beaten, who died for you, and God raised him from the dead. He's coming back as the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. Every knee will bow. Every tongue will confess that he is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. So what an event, what a time that we get to be the runners at the last part of the race. So let's accelerate, let's hustle, let's go for it. Come back next week and we'll look and see what's happened. I would think there's going to be an uptick even more with what's happened with Hezbollah on the north. I didn't quote all the things the different generals said, but they pretty much all said we're about to have a radical escalation with Hezbollah in the north. So have a blessed week. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem, and we'll see you next Wednesday. Bless you.
Thanks for joining us today at the End of Days Update. If you'd like to be notified every time there's a new post, just go to the EDU at josephmorris.com and subscribe to receive email alerts. If these posts and updates have been a blessing to you, please consider making a one-time donation to help get the message out, or even becoming a monthly partner with Joseph Morris Ministries. Thanks again for tuning in to the EDU, and we'll see you next week.